They're calculating, they're quiet, and they see through manipulation like it's written in neon lights. When an INTJ encounters a narcissist, something fascinating happens. It's not a loud confrontation or a dramatic showdown. It's something far more devastating. The narcissist slowly realizes they've met their match, and they have no idea how to handle it. Most people think narcissists are unstoppable. They charm their way into relationships, manipulate situations to their advantage, and leave a trail of confused victims in their wake. But there's one personality type that doesn't play their game: the INTJ. And when these two forces collide, the narcissist doesn't just lose, they get completely dismantled without the INTJ even breaking a sweat. Here's what's about to blow your mind. INTJs don't fight narcissists head-on, they don't defend themselves, and they certainly don't try. They don't argue to expose them to everyone around. Instead, they do something far more powerful. They become completely immune to the narcissist's tactics while systematically removing their power source. It's like watching a master chess player defeat an opponent who doesn't even realize the game has started. In this deep dive, I'm going to reveal exactly how INTJs operate when they encounter narcissistic behavior. We'll explore the specific strategies they use, why these techniques are so devastatingly effective, and how the narcissist's own playbook becomes completely useless against an INTJ's natural defenses. But first, let me show you why this dynamic is so uniquely powerful. The thing about narcissists is they feed on specific types of reactions. They need emotional responses, they crave validation, and they thrive on control. Remove any of these elements, and their entire system starts to collapse. INTJs, almost by accident, remove all three simultaneously. They're naturally detached, they don't seek external validation, and they absolutely refuse to be controlled by anyone. It's like the narcissist brought a sword to fight someone who's wearing invisible armor. But here's where it gets really interesting. Most people who deal with narcissists either become victims or they burn out trying to fight back. INTJs do neither. They observe, they analyze, and then they execute a strategy so subtle that the narcissist doesn't even realize what's happening until it's too late. The first weapon in the INTJ arsenal is something I call strategic indifference. While everyone else is getting tangled up in the narcissist's drama, the INTJ simply opts out. They don't engage with emotional manipulation because they process everything through logic first. When a narcissist tries their usual tactics, guilt trips, rage episodes, or pity parties, the INTJ responds with the emotional equivalent of a shrug. Picture this scenario. A narcissistic colleague is having a meltdown because their project isn't getting enough attention. They're storming around the office, complaining loudly about how underappreciated they are, expecting everyone to rally around them and validate their genius. Most people either get drawn into the drama or they try to avoid it entirely. The INTJ, they continue working on their own project, completely unbothered. When the narcissist directly approaches them for support, the INTJ responds with something like, "That sounds frustrating. Have you considered talking to the project manager about resource allocation? No drama, no emotional investment, just a logical suggestion." The narcissist walks away confused because they didn't get the reaction they were fishing for. There was no supply, no emotional payoff, nothing to feed on. It's like trying to start a fire with wet wood. Nothing catches. This strategic indifference isn't cruelty, it's protection. INTJs have learned, often through painful experience, that engaging with manipulative behavior only encourages more of it. So they develop what I call emotional firewalls. They can observe the narcissist's behavior, understand exactly what's happening, but remain completely unaffected by it. The second technique INTJs use is pattern recognition and documentation. While everyone else is dealing with the immediate chaos a narcissist creates, the INTJ is quietly building a comprehensive understanding of their behavior patterns. They notice when the manipulation happens, what triggers it, and how it typically plays out. They're not doing this to gossip or to attack the narcissist. They're doing it to protect themselves and others. Remember, INTJs are natural systems thinkers. They see the bigger picture. When they encounter a narcissist, they don't just see the individual incidents. They see the entire operational framework. They understand that the rage isn't really about the coffee being cold. It's about control. They recognize that the sob story isn't about seeking comfort. It's about manipulating sympathy. This level of analysis makes them virtually immune to future manipulation attempts because they can predict them. Here's a real-world example. An INTJ manager notices that one of their team members consistently creates crises right before important deadlines. The crises always seem to require immediate attention and lots of support from colleagues. Most managers would address each incident individually, trying to solve the immediate problem. The INTJ manager recognizes the pattern. They start documenting the timing, the nature of each crisis, and the resources that get diverted each time. After gathering enough data, they implement a simple policy change. All crisis situations must be submitted in writing with a proposed solution before any additional resources are allocated. Suddenly, the crises stop happening. The narcissistic employee can't create their usual chaos because there's now a systematic barrier in place. The INTJ didn't confront anyone. They didn't accuse anyone of anything. They simply changed the system to make manipulation less effective. The third strategy INTJs employ is what I call controlled information sharing. Narcissists rely heavily on information asymmetry to maintain their advantage. They hoard information, spread selective truths, and control narratives to keep others confused and dependent. INTJs see right through this and respond by becoming extremely strategic about what information they share and when. They never give a narcissist ammunition that can be used against them or others. They keep their personal lives private. They don't share their opinions on sensitive topics, and they certainly don't reveal their own vulnerabilities. But here's the sophisticated part. They also become very deliberate about what information they do share. If a narcissist is spreading rumors about a colleague, the INTJ doesn't defend the colleague directly. Instead, they might casually mention factual information that contradicts the narrative. They do this in a way that seems completely natural and unrelated to the drama. Over time, these small corrections undermine the narcissist's credibility without creating any direct confrontation. The fourth technique is perhaps the most devastating. INTJs excel at exposing inconsistencies through simple questions. They don't argue with narcissists, they don't challenge them directly, and they don't try to prove them wrong. Instead, they ask clarifying questions that force the narcissist to explain their position more thoroughly. Help me understand how that timeline works. Can you walk me through your reasoning on that decision? What data are you using to support that conclusion? These aren't attacks. They're genuine requests for information. But narcissists typically build their positions on emotional manipulation rather than solid logic. When forced to explain their reasoning clearly, their arguments often fall apart on their own. The INTJ doesn't need to point out the flaws. The flaws become obvious to everyone listening. This questioning technique is particularly effective in professional settings. A narcissistic colleague might claim credit for work they didn't do. Instead of accusing them directly, the INTJ asks innocent questions about specific aspects of the project. That's interesting. How did you solve the integration problem with the legacy system? If they didn't actually do the work, they can't provide detailed answers. Their credibility takes a hit without the INTJ having to make any accusations. The beauty of this approach is that it's completely defensible. The INTJ can honestly say they were just trying to understand the situation better. Meanwhile, the narcissist is left scrambling to maintain their facade without being able to blame anyone for their exposure. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of how INTJs handle narcissists is their long-term strategic thinking. While most people get caught up in individual battles, INTJs are playing an entirely different game. They're not trying to win arguments or prove points. They're systematically removing the conditions that allow narcissistic behavior to flourish. They understand that narcissists are like parasites. They need host environments to survive and thrive. Remove the host conditions, and the parasite simply can't function. So INTJs don't waste energy trying to change the narcissist. Instead, they change the environment around them. This is where things get truly fascinating. INTJs operate on multiple levels simultaneously. On the surface, they appear completely normal, even helpful. But underneath, they're running sophisticated countermeasures that the narcissist can't even perceive. It's like they're playing chess, while the narcissist thinks they're playing checkers. The fifth strategy INTJs use is what I call strategic alliance building. But this isn't about forming cliques or creating drama. It's much more subtle than that. INTJs naturally gravitate toward competent, authentic people. They build relationships based on mutual respect and shared goals. Over time, this creates a network of allies who trust the INTJ's judgment and integrity. When a narcissist tries to manipulate situations or spread their influence, they find themselves working against this invisible network. Not because the INTJ has turned people against them, but because authentic relationships naturally resist manipulation. People who have genuine connections with the INTJ are less likely to be swayed by the narcissist's tactics. Here's how this plays out in practice. A narcissistic actually completed by their subordinates. A team leader tries to take credit for a project that was a typical environment. They might get away with this because people are afraid to speak up or they don't have enough information. But if there's an INTJ on the team, the situation unfolds differently. The INTJ has been quietly building relationships with key stakeholders throughout the project. Not for political reasons, but because they value competence and want to ensure project success. When the narcissist tries to rewrite history, these stakeholders already have accurate information about who actually did the work. The INTJ doesn't need to defend themselves because the truth is already established through their network. The sixth technique is perhaps the most sophisticated. INTJs master something I call adaptive mirroring. They don't mirror the narcissist's emotions or behaviors like most people do unconsciously. Instead, they mirror back exactly what the narcissist is giving, but in a way that reveals the absurdity of the behavior. If a narcissist is being overly dramatic about a minor issue, the INTJ responds with perfect professionalism and rationality. The contrast becomes obvious to everyone watching. If the narcissist tries to use guilt trips, the INTJ responds with genuine concern for the logical implications of whatever problem is being presented. They take everything at face value, stripping away the emotional manipulation and dealing only with the actual content. This is incredibly disarming because narcissists rely on people getting caught up in the emotional subtext of their communications. When someone responds only to the literal meaning, their manipulation attempts become transparent and ineffective. But here's where INTJs truly excel. They understand that the most powerful weapon against a narcissist is their own behavior. So instead of trying to expose the narcissist to others, they simply create conditions where the narcissist exposes themselves. The seventh strategy is environmental design. INTJs are natural architects, not just of buildings or systems, but of social and professional environments. They understand that behavior is largely shaped by context, so they work to create contexts where authentic, competent behavior is rewarded and manipulative behavior becomes obviously counterproductive. In meetings, they establish clear agendas and stick to them. This prevents narcissists from hijacking discussions or creating chaos. They document decisions and action items, making it harder for people to later claim they said or agreed to things they didn't. They create transparent processes where everyone's contributions are visible, making it difficult for anyone to claim credit for others' work. These aren't anti-narcissist measures specifically. They're just good practices that happen to neutralize narcissistic tactics. The beauty is that the INTJ can implement these changes for perfectly legitimate reasons, improving overall team effectiveness while simultaneously removing the narcissist's ability to manipulate situations. The eighth technique INTJs use is what I call strategic withdrawal. This isn't about running away or avoiding confrontation. It's about carefully choosing when and where to engage. INTJs understand that their energy is finite and valuable. They're not going to waste it on battles that can't be won or situations that don't matter in the long term. When a narcissist tries to draw them into drama, the INTJ evaluates whether engagement serves any constructive purpose. If it doesn't, they simply don't participate. They might physically remove themselves from the situation, or they might remain present but emotionally detached. They become like water, flowing around obstacles rather than crashing against them. This drives narcissists absolutely crazy because their tactics depend on getting reactions. When someone simply refuses to play the game, all their strategies become useless. It's like trying to argue with someone who's wearing headphones. The narcissist can rant and rage, but there's no audience, no supply, no payoff. The ninth strategy is perhaps the most devastating to narcissists in the long run. INTJs excel at building systems that outlast individuals. While the narcissist is focused on immediate gratification and short-term wins, the INTJ is creating structures that will function effectively long after current personalities are gone. They document processes, they train team members, they establish protocols and standards. They're not doing this to spite the narcissist. They're doing it because they believe in sustainable excellence. But the side effect is that these systems make organizations less vulnerable to manipulation and more resistant to the chaos that narcissists typically create. Over time, this systematic approach creates environments where narcissistic behavior simply doesn't work anymore. The structures and processes don't allow for the kind of manipulation and chaos that narcissists need to maintain their influence. It's like building a house that's naturally resistant to termites. You don't have to fight the termites directly. You just create an environment where they can't survive. What makes this entire dynamic so powerful is that the INTJ never has to become the villain in the story. They maintain their integrity, they focus on constructive goals, and they treat everyone with basic respect. Meanwhile, the narcissist's own behavior becomes increasingly obvious and ineffective against these systematic defenses. The narcissist finds themselves in an impossible position. They can't attack the INTJ directly because there's nothing to attack. The INTJ hasn't done anything wrong, hasn't said anything inappropriate, hasn't violated any professional or social norms. Yet somehow, all their usual tactics have stopped working. This creates a kind of psychological short circuit in the narcissist. They're used to getting reactions. to creating drama, to being the center of attention, whether positive or negative. But the INTJ has created a reality where none of that matters anymore. The narcissist becomes irrelevant to the systems and relationships that actually determine outcomes. And there you have it. The complete blueprint for how INTJs systematically dismantle narcissistic manipulation without ever firing a shot. They don't engage in dramatic confrontations or public exposures. They don't need to. They simply create reality where narcissistic tactics become powerless and irrelevant. The narcissist brought manipulation to a logic fight. They brought chaos to meet systematic thinking. They brought short-term games to challenge long-term strategy. Like, share, and subscribe if you felt this. And if you're an INTJ, drop a red heart in the comments to let the rest of us know you're watching.